Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off, where it's December of 1994, so let's unwrap some discs to see who's been naughty or nice. As we look at CU Amiga, Amiga Power and Amiga Action. Fight! We start with Amiga Power, that has gifted us 3 games across 2 discs, with the first being a classic game on another system, Aladdin, which opens up with the final game's menu, if not its music, which might be something we're grateful for, as the title has some little special samples. Starting the demo proper, we get to play the entirety of the first level, and this is quite a nice looking game, which you'd expect for an Amiga 1200 only title. The default controls are you move around with the joystick, and yes, it is up to jump, with the fire button activating the sword, and if you want to throw an apple, well, you have to hit the spacebar to change what the fire button does. It can be a little bit awkward. Thankfully, there is an option to use a 2-button pad, but it's slightly broken in the demo, as it should allow you to use the second joystick button to either trigger a jump or a throw. But in the demo, it looks like it'll only work with a CD32 controller. It just does not want to work with my trusty joystick, even if it does work fine with the full title. I think at this point just about everyone has played this version of Aladdin, if not on this platform, as it's a port of the Mega Drive game, and for the most part it's quite faithful. And if you had a 1200 and didn't have access to a Mega Drive, then this wouldn't have been all that bad a choice to play it on, as it's better than some of the other ports. But it is a bit weird that this required an A1200. I think they could have done a version that would have also worked on an Amiga 500. 1994 was a time where we started to see more quick and dirty ports to the 1200 and skipping out the 500. So this was just part of that trend. The second disc gives us 2 demos, which had to be decompressed onto their own discs, which is a bit of a theme for this episode. And first up we have Amiga Power presents Sensible Golf, which opens up with a slightly different menu to the final game, as it allows us to make a selection out of 4 different predefined players, the names of which should be all seared into the memories of cannon fodder players. And after waking up or putting to sleep the various characters that you want, you get into the game proper. And the first thing to note is that map on the left hand side is a lie, so ignore it at all costs, as if we hit the spacebar we can see the actual map. And what is quite nice is that you can plan your shots from this screen, so you don't have to keep switching between a regular view and the zoomed out one. The action of hitting the ball is based on the now standard 3-tap system. 1 to start, 1 to set the power, and a 3rd to try and hit it straight. But this looks more like the micropose bar with it curving around the player than the PGA style of it being a simple straight bar. It also includes a few extra bits, like extra power if you hit it right at that very top zone, and then depending on the club and the situation, there might be these grey bits around the sliced red zones. And if you land in there, then that counts as a miss, so you do need to be quite careful. Now eventually you will land on the green, where you'll have to try and read the arrows. Now this is an area I think got improved in the final game, as it's far clearer, but generally it's pretty much the same. Now one of the most important things in any golf game is setting the right amount of power, and that can be a little bit hard to gauge when it's on a curved meter. So you have to be a bit more careful where you land that first hit. Now with 3 holes to play, this isn't actually too bad a demo, and I have to admit, I did enjoy this game even if it does get a bit of a bad rap. And the final demo for Power is Z-Wolf, This is a 3D helicopter game that has graphics in a similar style to Zark, or as it was known on the Amiga, Virus. But it does do its own thing with the squares, as it tries to blend the edges with each other. It does give this slightly blurred look that I've never really been sold on, but it is still quite a cool look in itself, particularly when all the other objects are 3D models. Even if that does take a bit of a toll on the frame rate, even on an Amiga 1200. The single level that we get to fly around was designed for the magazine, and even designed by the magazine's journalists, which is a pretty nice touch, and there is a range of goals for you to go for. But for the most part it's fly around and destroy something and everything that wants to shoot you back. There is also a handy map and list of the goals, so you can work out where you need to go and what you need to do. And on top of all that, there's also 3 different weapon types for you to work with. So it is feeling like a bit of a fully 3D Desert Strike. The weapons do a decent job of tracking onto the enemy if you're pointing in the right general direction, but that can be a bit fiddly at times. The controls aren't bad, but there can be some amount of inertia and lag between your inputs and it actually reacting, due to the frame rate at times. Topping up your guns and your fuel can be done via this special tank, that will require you to land. That is just a simple key button press. There are a bunch of extra keyboard buttons that are required for the game, so don't go too far away from the Amiga. And all in all, this is a fun demo, and a nice little game. CU Amiga gives us something to unwrap next, with 2 demos and a bit of professional software. And that software in question is XCAD, a CAD program or computer-aided design that allows you to draw 2D and 3D plans. This originally would have come with a 100-page booklet that would have gone into great detail on how to use it. But I don't have that. And there's not much in the way of documentation online, so I'm going to have to work this all out myself. And while I messed around with the menus and got yet another error about something being missing, I started to daydream about what the other magazines this month had to offer. I could have been checking out The One and playing Mortal Kombat 2, which isn't a bad conversion and demo. It's a bit fiddly due to insisting that the joystick in port 2 is player 2 rather than being the accepted player 1, but it's a fun demo and it runs on all Amigas. But then there was Rise of the Robots, which did have something unique for the Amiga versions, the ability to play a game without having to swap a single disc. Magical. But the gameplay? Oh, the gameplay, it's just the same. Just the same. Just the same. Ugh, I think I woke up from a nightmare just in time. The magazine said it spoke for itself. Well, yeah, it did. And while XCAD might not have been the most exciting thing we'll see today, it is cool that they provided it, even if I literally managed to get nothing done with it. I do wonder how many people used it, and what they used it for. So let's move on to the first demo, which is a bit of a late one for Theme Park. But it's not just any old theme park demo, it's a festive version, with a snowy ground for you to build on, and a number of Christmas related items. Well, we will see them once we get past this overly long tutorial that you can't skip. Now this is based on the Amiga 500 version of the game, which is the one that I picked up back in the day. Now this had a few limitations when it was put up against the Amiga 1200 and PC editions, and this included having a single standard design for all the concession stands, with just a little disc at the top showing you what type they were. There was also a few less rides and much less animation. In the demo we have 3 rides, which includes the classic bouncy castle, the always fun ghost house, and a new one just for the demo, Santa's Grotto. But this isn't the last time we're going to see Old Saint Nick, as you can also place down Santas into the level to entertain the guests, which will definitely be needed with just 3 ride choices. And after placing a few, you might want to go and turn those sound effects off, as you'll hear Santa calling out for his alternative payment method more often than you might like.
Ho, 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 ho! Ho, 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 ho! Ho, ho, ho!
On top of him, there's also a snowman that you can place, as well as the usual mechanics and handymen. The shops are also quite limited, as you have the Christmas pudding stall and a balloon one. But don't place too many, as you can't buy more stock in the demo. You might think you can, due to the fact it shows a stock screen at the beginning, but it's simply just a static image to tell you what you're going to get in the full game. So you can expect to run out of stock well before the 3 years of in-game time runs out. And you can make your park seem far more festive by placing down some decorated trees and some iced over ponds. It is a fun demo, and I like the touches that they made to make it a bit more Christmassy. And the final demo for CU Amiga is at the opposite end of the gaming spectrum, as it's Super Stardust. And not just any old Super Stardust, it's the tunnel sequence, which still wows me to this day. It's so smooth to animate and move, and the rocks move really nicely. And the large ship that comes in halfway along still looks great, even with it trying to throw lots of mines your way. Simply put, this is a lot of fun. It's slightly a shame that this is really quite short, as it's only just one sequence, so you're going to get to see everything this demo has to offer in a single pass, so that's going to last, what, a few minutes? But you can just keep jumping back in to play it again and again. And if you want to know more about Super Stardust and these tunnel sequences, well, I've done a whole video on it. And we've even covered the asteroids part of this game in a previous Cover This Face-Off, which this really does end up completing. So another great demo, even if it is a little short. The final magazine to unwrap is Amiga Action, but not the December edition. We are instead going to be looking at the special Christmas edition. That's right, Amiga Action put out 2 magazines this month, and one of them had a whopping 4 discs, with 3 demos, shareware and an extra special thing for the magazine, as well as a cheat disc as well. Starting the first demo, and we have what is most likely the least Christmassy thing around. It's Skeleton Crew. And this has to be peak using K's for C's. The game is an isometric shooter, which can be a bit of a problem when you have a limited number of buttons. In 1-button mode, you'll just fire in the direction that you're moving, with holding down the fire button locking you in that direction. In 2-button mode, 1 button shoots while rotating clockwise, while the other shoots while rotating anti-clockwise, and holding down both buttons will lock you in the current direction. It's an odd control method, more so when you realise that they had to use a number of keyboard keys as well, as there's a jump and a weapon switch, and these buttons will change depending on the input method. Though you can technically trigger these by just tapping the fire buttons, but I tend to find this is much less responsive than it should be. In the demo, we only get to play as this dude, but in the final game it's up to 2 players, with you being able to select between 3 different characters. The gameplay is mostly what you'd expect from this type of game: shoot constantly and take out everything that gets in your way. Every so often there might be an odd little puzzle where you have to shoot open a door or take down a shield, but it is pretty basic stuff. Though it does have some pretty fancy big bosses for you to deal with. As a demo, it's decent enough as it's the first level, even if some of the extras are missing, and it does give you a pretty good idea of what to expect from this AGA only game. The second disc brings us Sensible World of Moon Soccer, a football venue that also confiscated the alcohol but that was due to them needing it to fuel the rocket ship back home. This is effectively the sensible World of Soccer demo that we've seen previously, but with a new league, of what looks like randomly generated names for both the teams and the players. And obviously there's now the moon for the pitch. But amazingly, for this being played on the moon, not much has changed. The physics have been tweaked to be a little bit different, but really you have to know the game inside and out to be able to tell the difference. And those craters, well, they can deflect the ball slightly, but again, it's barely noticeable. So it can feel like it's a bit of a graphic swap with little else added. But it is still cool that you can play the entirety of a league, with you either being the manager or also getting to play the matches, as well as obviously being able to play some friendlies. It's better than some of the older sensible football demos where it was just a single goal and that's it. But for me, it's still not sold me on the game. I've never been a huge sensible soccer fan, or a fan of football in general. So let's just move on to the next demo, which is Sound the Space Ace. This is an Amiga Action exclusive follow-up to Ace the Space Case. That you can tell by that little box in the corner telling you this isn't shareware or PD. It's Amiga Action only. You better not copy these discs. Sound's goal is to collect all the gems in a level. But as is always the case, there's things here that want to stop you. But you do have a weapon that you can use against them, which is a bouncing fish that explodes? Okay. This means that the levels become these little challenge boxes that you have to try and solve, where you need to work out the route you need to take to get all the gems. All while trying your best to avoid or find the right angle to take out those odd selection of baddies that will try and get in the way. To try and incentivize you to blow up the enemies, they will drop items when they die. It might be a letter that when you collect enough of them to spell extra, you gain an extra life and skip the level, or it might be a short-lived invincibility or even topping up your health. Overall, it's a decent game from a PD author, and it's a fun, if basic, arcade-style Euro platformer, with a decent number of levels for you to explore as well. And we move on to another platformer, this time the puzzle kind, in the form of Bubble Gun. You are a dinosaur crocodile thing, and you have a gun that fires bubbles. But it has limited ammo, so you'll have to pick your targets very carefully. The goal is to open up the exit, which is done when you find the open exit token. Now this might be hidden in the level itself, or inside chests. To open those chests up, you'll need to collect the 3 parts of the correctly coloured key, the order of which doesn't really matter. The chest might give you something useful, like another key part or the exit token, or it might just be something like more time. Now you can't help but notice the timer, as it's right there on the HUD, and it's one of the main sounds that you'll hear in the game. The thud, thud, thud of time ticking down. It sounds like someone was trying to channel Space Invaders, but I don't think it really works here, even if the timer can be quite harsh when you're on the later levels, as you get very little time. This isn't helped as the demo jumps between the various worlds of the final game, as the second level comes from World 7, and the third one comes from World 3. So the difficulty is a bit all over the place. I'm not sure how many levels there are in the demo, as the third one kept beating me, and I had to look up a Let's Play to work out what it is I had to do here. But it is a fun, if slightly PD looking and sounding game. It's got lots of nice touches, and feels a little bit like Dizzy in places, with you having to put blocks back down again. But overall, I do enjoy it, even if I do think they need some music in those levels, rather than that walking and heartbeat sound effects that constantly keep going. The final PD game is Fruit Mania, which shouldn't be confused with the commercial game of the same name. This is its own unique shareware title. And after a few basic menus, we arrive at what is a relatively faithful fruit machine. What was a staple in every pub at the time is here in gaming form. But it does mean you can't collect your winnings. But at the same time, you're not going to lose a lot of money as you keep pumping more into it. Because as this game shows, winning isn't always going to happen. In my first game, I didn't get a single penny. Talk about a stingy machine. And one that isn't cooperating in trying to record some interesting footage. The second game went much better as I managed to trigger one of the few different ways that you can gain cash. First is to try and get enough numbers, or using a lucky chance, to light up the Fruit Mania letters. If you manage that, then you'll get onto the game board, where you can randomly pick a game to play. And there are a few different variations here, and for the most part they'll be pretty much self-explanatory. You can also do the classic lining up of the same fruits, and then this will give you an extra chance to try and gamble to either win big or to lose out. All in all, this manages to recreate the classic fruit machine experience, with you mostly losing money than winning. It's just a shame this seems to be completely silent, but it does mention that there is sound effects and music in the full title if you're wanting to pay for it. The final disc for the magazine, and no snickering, is the cheat database Backdoor. And it is more or less what it says. It's a collection of cheats and level codes for a wide range of games. But not just cheats, it's also got the numbers for hint lines and addresses that you could contact. But really, it's the cheats that are the core part of this database. And it's not a bad collection. It's nowhere near complete even at this point, but there are quite a lot of them. And not just cheats, but also hints and tips for some of the games as well. But the odd thing was, this needed to be expanded onto its own disc. Which, yes, was something we had to do for the majority of the games of this month, but the annoying part is, there was nothing else on that disc. They should have just pre-expanded the disc and given you that. But instead we have this disc that, for some reason, is mostly full. What of? I have no idea. I think it might be actually slightly corrupted, as the size of the files on the disc don't match up with how much it thinks is filled. So they might have been planning to put something else on this disc and then quickly removed it at the last minute. I'm not entirely sure, but it is a bit of a mystery, isn't it? And I think there is where we're going to have to leave this and start the summing up, as we had 3 and a bit magazines and we need to work out where they're going to stack up. Well, the one didn't even make it to the stands. I think that speaks for itself. But in last place, I think it has to be CU Amiga. It has some cracking demos, and the only one that had a festive one as well, but they were both quite short really. In second place, I think I'm going to have to give this to Amiga Action. It might have had more discs and demos than everyone else, and they were a lot of fun, but I thought the quality was a little bit missing. So Amiga Power takes the top spot. It had a few large demos, and ones that were really nicely polished as well, even with a few custom levels. So yeah, I think it did the best. And as always, if you agree, disagree, or have anything else to say, then let me know down in the comments. And as we round out another year, I'd like to say thanks for watching. I hope 2022 was good for you, but let's make 2023 even better. And so, for the last time this year, I was the Goldfish, that was quite a few discs, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching and getting this far. If you'd like to see more of this, or me, then check out the video links that you can see on the screen right now. Or you can give this video a cheeky thumbs up, and if you're feeling extra festive then you can even try subscribing, as that would be quite nice.